there, and welcome to the Philosophical Cowgirl. I'm your host, Sarah Geis, a former philosophy professor and current full-time horse person. This show is where the horse world meets the deep questions of life. In each episode, I'll share insights from my own learning process and sometimes discuss fascinating ideas with some of the brightest minds out there. I'm a relentless learner, so in this podcast, you get to ride along with me on that lifelong journey. Whether you're a philosopher at heart, a horse person looking for something new to listen to, or you're just curious about how these two worlds intersect, this is the show for you. In this episode, we talk about several things of consequence to the average horse owner. We know about a lot of these things through the work that Western Justice is doing. One of the things that we're going to talk about is the Horse Protection Act, or HPA. This is set to go into effect in February of 2025, and it has massive ramifications. I've put a link in the description of this episode so you can read more about it. I'm here with Dave Duquette from Western Justice, and I really appreciate you being here.
Well, you bet. Thanks for having me on.
Well, what I would like to do is we are going to talk about the issues that Western Justice is interested in fighting and is seeing happening in this country. But first of all, I kind of want to get a little background on you. And if you can tell me kind of where you're from, how you got into the horse industry, and then how you ended up at Western Justice. I know that's probably a long story, but
Well, it's a lot. There's a lot of history in here. So I trained horses for 20 plus years, mostly reiners and rein cow horses. I got into the rein cow horse back in my first snaffle bidder was in 99. So that was a long time ago now. But that's where I basically based most of my show career was in the after 99 was almost totally in the cow horse world. So, enjoyed that. I saw in 06 when the market was just going nuts and we were 05, 06 was kind of the heyday. There was at least 4 million more horses, domestic horses in the United States back in 05. They were a lot more affordable. They were a lot, the average person could be involved. There was a lot of what we call the backyarders, or people who just had a horse because they wanted one, they could afford it, and they would keep one or two of them around. And, I grew up southeast of Seattle and northeast of Tacoma. And over in that area, those two counties had more horses per square mile than any place in the nation at one time. Wow. And that's when Bob Avila was up here, Steve Metcalf, a bunch of those guys that were up in this area showing a lot. And there was a quarter horse show every weekend throughout almost the whole year, except for maybe on holidays and even some of them on holidays. But there was horse shows, team ropings, there was, all kinds of different cow horse events, cutting. There was 3 or 4 cutting clubs up here. It was a big event, our big industry up here. And then we also had the Hermiston Horse Sale, which is 3 miles from my house, which would run about 3 times a year. It would run about 1,500 horses through it every time. I mean, it'd go 3 days and they would run that many horses. They'd go almost nonstop all night long for the whole, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then into Monday. The canner horses always sold on Monday, but, when they started, I got into politics and never paid it. I'm a high school educated Marine. I went in the Marine Corps right out of high school. So, when I saw the horse slaughter market going down and I heard about it, I thought I don't know if it's a unique perspective, but it's a perspective that most people at the higher levels don't have. Because I sold horses from the, $1,500 range, which was pretty rare because I was into the show horses more. But I was getting a lot of the trainers like Avila and those guys. I was getting their rejects or the ones that they needed to sell so they get their customer to buy a new one and they couldn't get out of there, or an older horse. So I had a lot of the the team pinners, before this, even before sorting really got big, the mounted shooters, the team pinners, the rodeo people that wanted to pick up a broke older horse, the youth kids. I had a lot of those people I sold a lot of horses to. And those, I was selling probably $500,000 worth of horses a year.
Wow.
In today's standards, that doesn't sound like a lot. But back then, I might crack a nut at a $20,000 horse I sold, but most of mine were between the $5,000 to $15,000 range, and I was on top of that market. When I saw them shutting down the horse slaughter market, slaughter plants, I went straight in front of Frank Merrill was the president at the time at AQHA. I was at the AQHA World Show showing. Bill Brewer was there. All the big names. They were all standing at Avila stalls. And I walked right in the middle of them in 2006. And I said, guys, what are we doing about this? This is going to ruin the industry and horse welfare. And here I am, somebody who never paid attention to politics. I mean, I voted, but I didn't pay attention, wasn't into politics. And they just looked at me and they were like, there's nothing we can do. It's done. We're going to figure out how to deal with it without it. And oh boy, this is going to get bad. So I thought I got just enough tenacity. I know a lot of very wealthy people from being in the horse business, selling horses for them or to them, or, brokering deals. So I thought, I'm going to do something about it. I got just enough tenacity to do something about it. So I started in on that and very quickly became the face of trying to keep horse slaughter in the United States, because everybody wanted a villain, right? On all the animal rights groups wanted a villain on that. And here I was, this young horse trainer that was out there speaking out about it. And it made me their villain. So I became very famous very quickly for that, even though that's probably not something you want to be famous for. Anyway, that's how I got started in the politics. And when I first went to DC, I had a tremendous group of 3 guys that were my mentors there. And I don't know if you know how DC works. Most people don't, but if you go over there, you might get a meeting with your senator or congressman, and that's about it. And you'll be lucky to get those meetings.
Yeah.
And so when I was over there, not only did I have Conrad Burns, who was a Republican, but it wasn't so polarized, and you could go across the aisle. We could go talk to Republicans, Democrats, mostly blue dogs. There was a lot of blue dogs back then. So we were able to get a lot done. I mean, I worked with Leonard Boswell from Iowa. He was a blue dog Democrat from Iowa, and he was one of our biggest champions. And Steve King from Iowa was another one, but he's a Republican. So we worked both sides of the aisle, and we were able to do that back then. Here I am, this guy that's trying to keep horse slaughter going. And I started noticing all the other things that the horse industry wasn't doing. At that point, I got involved with the American Horse Council. I shouldn't say involved. I guess it is involved, but I got around them and started realizing how feckless they were and how they really didn't do anything at all. Any hard issue, they would sit and ride the fence. So, and I mean, at best, that's what they would do. So I started calling them out in 2008 and had a major coup attempt going in 2008. Just so everybody knows, they are run by the Jockey Club.
Interesting.
The thoroughbred world is less than 5% of the domestic horses in the United States, and they are running this whole DC effort on all of this stuff. And they think these guys that are most of them are a bunch of wealthy guys that don't ride horses. They watch somebody else ride them and watch them run around the track. That's all fine and good. I'm not disparaging them for that. But what I am disparaging them for is the fact that they are doing the bidding and making rules. The Western horse world is 75 to 80% of the domestic horses in the United States.
Right.
So, and because of the decisions that Jockey Club and Horse Council have made, on throwing the Tennessee Walkers under the bus as a sacrificial lamb. Yes, they had some problems. Yes, they stopped it. They put in laws to make soaring illegal, and they did that 35, 40 years ago, almost 50 now. They did that, and now they're doing exactly what we told everybody they were going to do for the last. I mean, I've been singing about this for the last 14 years, since 2010, that the Horse Protection Act in USDA is coming into our world. And everybody looked at me like, Dave, put your tinfoil hat back on and get back in your basement. And you know, everybody in the horse industry, oh, they'll never come out. They'll never get us. We'll never, you know, the team ropers associations, you know, the rodeo world, everybody, oh, they're never going to stop us. And that's not everybody. I shouldn't say it's everybody in those industries. There's a lot of people that believe what I'm saying and are a part of things, and high ups in the PRCA and people like that, people that have, you know, knowledge and jobs that are accountable. But there was a lot of people, stock contractors and people like that. They'll never be able to stop me. I have 500 personal horses, and they're never going to stop me from doing what I do. Well,
They will.
it's coming.
Yeah.
You know,
Go ahead.
Oh, well, all the things, you know, kind of fast forwarding through Protect the Harvest, because of my stance on horse slaughter and being on Brett Baer's show in 2011, it was kind of funny because I was at right after we got the riders off the appropriations bill to be able to open plants back up. That was November 18th, 2011. During the cutting horse futurity that year, Brett Baer had me on his show, and I was standing in front of the live remote. I was in front of the horses running in the stockyards, in the big bronzes in the stockyards in Fort Worth, and standing out there in the snow. But Forrest Lucas saw me on that, and he thought, man, if this guy's willing to get up and talk about this, I want him to come work for me at Protect the Harvest. So not too long after that, I went to work for Forrest and ended up running Protect the Harvest for quite a while, and was, you know, we did a lot of really good stuff there, but most of it was behind the scenes. And that's, you know, that's part of what I struggle with right now is all the things that Forrest did with his money to save all of us and put his money out there. The horse industry has to do now. The horse industry has to pay for it, because we don't have a Forrest Lucas right now. We don't have a Forrest Lucas that'll spend the money to do all the things that need to be done and need to be taken care of. And there's a lot of, I get people asking me all the time, well, what do you guys do? And one of the things that we do that most people don't even understand is every year, every bill cycle, there's minimum probably 15 things that we block, and upwards of 50 at times on certain years when the animal rights groups are very active. And we block those things because we have relationships, and we've done the right thing to build the relationships where I can call a senator or a congressman that's on a committee, and I can say, hey, here's all the reasons why this is bad. Here's all the reasons why you need to stop it. And they're able to stop something in committee. Well, there'd be, like I said, there's probably 15 to 50 things that get stopped every year. That we can't go talk about. We don't go talk about, because I'm not going to burn my sources or who did it, or, you know, go out there and say, hey, we did this and we did that. You know, the obvious things that we do, you know, like getting the Hammond's pardon, that was a big deal. And even our own industries.
And can you explain in a nutshell what that was, what that pardon was, to people who don't know?
So the Hammonds were, it's so funny because people have wrote, there's a book out there about it. There's people have tried to get the rights to do the movie, and the Hammonds don't want any fanfare. So the Hammonds had in a nutshell, there was a giant reservoir on their deeded ground on top of the Steam Mountains that the Corps of Engineers, I think, was the ones that had built it back in the 40s, somewhere around there. It's probably, I'll bet you it's 250 to 500 acre reservoir. And it's deep. I mean, it's 90 feet deep in spots, full of water. So in the West, if you can prove that somebody doesn't have beneficial use of water, you have to document it for 10 years. You can go to court and you can try to obtain those water rights. Well, this was on the Hammonds' deeded ground on top of the Steam Mountains. And they didn't have the water rights to it. And the only person who would have beneficial use to that would be them, because there was an outlet that came down right into their farming ground and all that. So they were the only ones that really had beneficial use. So they were able to prove that in 2010, 9 or 10, and then in court in the Ninth Circuit, and they won the water rights to that. Well, that's when all hell broke loose. And the federal government came after them. They made up a bunch of charges to be able to prosecute them for 2 fires that were backburns, that were coming, lightning strikes that were coming, started fires, and the fires were coming right towards their home place. So they lit 2 backfires, 2 different years. It burned up about 140 acres, I think, total between the 2 of BLM ground, which out in that area is nothing. I mean, 140 acres is like, spitting distance out there.
Right.
And I mean, because you're talking about the biggest county in Oregon with the smallest population of people in any county. And it's by double, I think, the largest county in Oregon.
Wow.
Well, they lit these 2 backburns. They burned up 140 acres or 42 acres, whatever it is. And the federal government used these trumped up charges that they made to file a suit against them to file charges against them under the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act,
Wow.
which was designed after the Oklahoma City bombing. It came into effect so that if someone burned federal ground or damaged federal ground in that way, then they could go after them under this act. The minimum sentence is 5 years on that if you're convicted. So they go into court in Pendleton. The judge says, he throws out all the bullshit charges. I mean, all of them, except for the Hammonds admitted to lighting those backfires that burned up 142 acres. Well, this law was never designed for anything like that. That kind of stuff happens every day. And we were able to show, so they got charged as terrorists under that act because they were being charged under that act. They were guilty under that act. And the judge said, well, I can't, he had some very eloquent words. I'm not going to remember them exactly, but he was basically, it was shock the conscience to give them 5 years. These good people who would do anything for the community and all that, and given so much, it would shock the conscience to give them 5 years in prison. So he gave Dwight 30 days and Stephen, I think 6 months or something like that, because he had 2. Well, they got out, and then the federal government, the Obama administration, sent this gal. I mean, this gal was probably a Willamette University, I want to say, graduate, because that's where all the greenies come from. And they used her. She'd never tried a case in her life. They used her to go in and it ruined her career, by the way, doing this. But they used her, made her a U.S. attorney, used her to go back after the Hammonds and send them back to jail for their minimum 5-year sentence.
Wow.
And in the back room, it was never in writing anywhere, the federal government told them that they would make it all go away if they just gave them the reservoir back and the 400 acres up around it, if they just gave it to the feds. Well, I wish they would have put that in writing. But the Hammonds, when they said it, they were just like, no, we're not going to do that. We'll take our lumps and go.
Right.
So, so anyway, that was the Hammond deal in a nutshell. We got them out. Still haven't got their permits back. Secretary Zinke, the last thing he did leaving in the Interior Department, he called the last phone call he made was to Dwight Hammond and said, I got your permits back. And then the BLM and the bureaucrats have all held off and not done what they were supposed to do, what they were mandated to do. And then, fast forward into the next couple of years, there was President Trump did a great executive order to mandate these agencies go out and assure that, all of the people were getting, their permits back, and we're back to grazing the way we were supposed to be before all these wildfires hit. I mean, we've got direct correlation between the wildfires and the lack of grazing.
Oh, I believe it. Going back to the slaughter issue, it's so easy to persuade people who aren't in the industry that slaughter is a bad thing, because all you have to do is appeal to emotion, right? All you have to do is say, gosh, all these horses are being killed, and there's lots of good horses in there that are just being sent to slaughter unjustly. But what we need is education for people to understand that this is a really complicated issue, and people who love horses often are also pro-slaughter, and because of lots of practical reasons and lots of welfare reasons. And all of these issues are that way, where, the person who isn't in the industry has kind of a bird's eye view and a knee-jerk reaction that seems obvious, that isn't, until you get someone like y'all out there to say, hey, look, here's how it looks from our perspective, the people who actually are on the ground dealing with it on a day-to-day basis.
My lobbyist that I use is also the lobbyist for the Tennessee Walking Horse World, and they are, he's very, very, very good, very knowledgeable about all of this stuff. But we've been basically blocking this new rule for 14 years. And in this last round, they were able to get the rule passed. And with that new rule, they're going to bleed into the Western horse world.
So what's the verbiage there?
Well, for one, over the last 14 years, they've been able to slip in there 3 or 4 times. I think it's 4 now in the whole act that has where all domestic horses are covered under the Horse Protection Act. You're gonna have to go read the HPA and the new rule. They've been hiding the new rule. The only reason we know some of the stuff that's happening and is going into that new rule is the fact that there's a lawsuit right now against it that my lobbyist is a part of. We've been watching and showing support for that. But that in the court documents, they had to admit that Dr. Reiner, who is the head veterinarian at APHIS and USDA, has said before, and we've called him out for it, he said he could see where riding a horse could be considered an act of soaring. So I'm like, whoa, pump the brakes, guys. You can't, who's going to be the arbiter of that? Who's going to be the one making those decisions? This is ridiculous. And then you sit and watch these 2 veterinarian, these gals, young gals that are veterinarians, probably never practiced a day in their life, but they're veterinarians and they work at APHIS, talking about all these issues and everything going on and what the rule is going to do. And it's funny because all I could think about listening to those 2 was the way they talked and the way they acted was like the Saturday Night Live skit with Alec Baldwin and those people, the Peace Freddy's balls, his Christmas ball, his little donuts. That's the way they talk the whole time. And those are the people making decisions for us. And they're unilaterally doing it, but it's so as of February 1st, if we don't get this thing blocked, which I feel like we have a really good chance of getting it blocked, but as of February 1st, they're going to have every horse show, every horse sale, every horse expo, every event with horses is going to have to register with USDA. And they even admitted in there, and we've got some quotes that are going to be coming out on our social media from the gals. We recorded some of that, where she talked about how speed events are exempt under the Horse Protection Act. But so the specific thing came up was 4-H and gymkhanas with, that have Western horsemanship or pleasure or, that kind of stuff. Any of those events are covered under the Horse Protection Act. They are not exempt. So you're talking about a whole mess of things that are going to happen. And here's the other kicker that scared the living daylights out of the NCHA when I was down there, and it should every horse show, is for every horse, you have to have one inspector per 100 horses. Well, the NCHA futurity is a month, and that's at a cost of $1,000 a day average per inspector.
Wow.
So the NCHA futurity had 2,300 horses there. So that's $23,000 a day for a month-long show. It's unsustainable. It's not something that can be, put together. So, and these people now have free reign, instead of like in the Tennessee walking world where they were able to just go, that you had to go stand in line to get your horse inspected before you showed. And those lines at a Tennessee walking show, there might be 100 horses. I mean, you're lucky at a big show to get that many. Well, they go stand in line for 5 hours to get their horse inspected, to go in every class. Every class they go in, they got to go get it inspected again. And then if you win, you get inspected again. But if you don't, then you're all right for the next one or whatever, or you go back in line. So if you've got, like in our world, the Western world, you go show your horse and your non-pro's got to show it, or your non-pro's going to show in two different classes. I go to cow horse shows where some of my non-pros show 3 times in one day. And it's 2 or 3 times. Well, they'd be spending 15 hours, in an inspection line. And it's probably going to be way worse than that because there's going to be so many horses there. So you've got that. And then you've got now another part of this rule that came out in the court documents that they're not talking about yet, and they want to dance around and not say, is that if you go into the pen and your horse gets hurt or scratched or bumped or goes over a jump and hits a rail and it scratches itself, or it goes, it clips itself going down the fence or whatever, that is, you are now, if they see it, you are now in violation of soaring your horse, which is a felony in most states.
Well, and then even at the Olympics, this is related to that. There was a dressage horse that bumped itself, and I zoomed in on it. I took a screenshot of it and zoomed in. That was the most negligible little non-cut. And they pulled the horse, and
it would have won that. It would have won.
Yeah.
That horse would have won. And if it didn't have a white fetlock,
nobody would have seen it.
Nobody would have seen it. There would have been a non-issue.
Yeah, that's so true. And these USDA people that we're talking about bringing in, what's the percentage of those people that'll be horse people, that'll actually be able to use their head and use some common sense and say, all right, well, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge deal, or that's pretty normal, or, that's an old injury that just hasn't quite healed over yet, or whatever.
Well, you won't even, if you have an old injury on your horse, they're not even going to let it in the pen.
Oh my goodness.
So you think about what that will do to all of these events. And right now, speed events are exempt.
Why is that?
Well, because the PRCA was the only one that did a really good job over the last 35 years getting themselves exempted from a lot of this stuff. They were the only organization that came together and really worked hard to get themselves exempted. And and say, hey, that we're not part of this. We don't soar our animals on purpose. And here's the question I asked during that Zoom call on Friday. I said, what if the HPA was designed to stop soaring of horses, purposeful soaring of horses? Why are you, and that the only ones that were doing it at that point were the Tennessee walkers and the racking horses. Why is this going into now covering every domestic horse and every,
Right.
why is that happening? And they specifically called out the jumping world, but those guys, the USEF is almost as bad as, well, they are, they're bad in a different way than Jockey Club, in the fact that they're actually setting themselves up for problems. Jeff, I don't know if you saw that or not, but they came out with a new rule that basically says that anybody can Karen somebody just like that and from a different state, and they'll go investigate it.
Yep.
I mean, what could go wrong?
Oh my
Really?
goodness.
What could go wrong there? And anytime that I say the same thing about anytime you bring the federal government into a private industry like this, what could go wrong?
And the USEF is kind of analogous to the federal government in the English world,
Mhm.
because it's so massive and so
Well,
all-encompassing and centralized.
yeah, and that's the interesting part too, because the USEF only covers about 3% of the horses, domestic horses in the United States, and we're allowing them to make rules like that.
Yeah.
To where, people are actually listening to it and going, well, maybe we should do that too. Oh, be careful what you wish for, because this is all going to turn into a giant mess.
It is. And they follow, because I was in the English world for a long time, and they follow a lot of the standards of horse care in Europe, because of the imported horses, and they do a lot of European warm bloods and a lot of international events and all of that. And in Europe, I mean, it's stuff like you get busted for clipping your horse's whiskers because supposedly then they can't feel anything through their whiskers or it hurts them, which is crazy because first of all, it's helpful to like a Mustang who's grazing through some really tall grass to have an extra sensory layer there to make sure he's not going to come across a cactus or something. But our horses, generally speaking, aren't in that situation, especially not show horses. So they don't necessarily need that extra layer of sensoriness. But then also, it doesn't hurt them to clip their whiskers. It's like clipping your fingernail. You can feel it, but it doesn't hurt. Anyway, but all that to say that has blown up. Just whiskers has blown up and become a huge issue.
Yeah, the stupidity of some of the things that are becoming issues is that's a prime example of it. And it's so ridiculous when you come from a background like I do with cowboying and doing, training horses and doing all this stuff. I mean, the people have bought into the fact that there's no bad horses. There's no, hell, if you want to go that far, there's no bad dogs. Why do we put dogs down for biting people? Why do we get rid of dogs that are their medulla oblongata is screwed up, so they're wanting to bite people? But that it's the same thing with horses. I mean, I've been around enough horses that have wanted to tear your head off. I mean, even Buck Brannaman, you see that famous video of him and that woman with that Palomino stud. I mean, people like that the general touchy-feely people love. Clinton Anderson's the same way. He's a buddy of mine, and he comes out and says the same kind of stuff. There are bad horses that need to go away. And we can't, it's just hard. It's a really hard thing to get people to understand that you get that some of these horse trainers out there and horse trainers that are trying to make their way and trying to do things very touchy-feely and try to tell everybody there's no bad horses, only bad horse trainers.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that could outthink a horse a lot better that are out there doing stuff with horses. But there are definitely a lot of bad horses.
Yeah, and the fact that they could
When
theoretically be fixed doesn't mean they're not bad right now, and it also doesn't mean that somebody is obligated to risk their life to try to fix the horse
exactly.
when it may not even work. So, yeah, and that they've gotta go somewhere, and it's the same thing with Mustangs. I know a lot of people, um, love the Mustangs and say they're just as good as every other horse. Well, some of them might be, to some extent in certain areas, but you've gotta I mean, I've been around a lot of Mustangs, and I've done a lot of Mustang training, and it's like, less than 50% of the horses I've been around that are Mustangs have been worth anything. I mean, good. And you have to sort of filter through all of them to find the good ones. Well, what happens with the rest of them? They
Yeah.
just sit in holding because nobody wants to acknowledge the possibility of slaughter as a more humane way of dealing with them than letting them sit for the rest of their lives. So anyway, but I'm going to ask you a few questions about just how in the world we can get these messages out, how we can fight better, what we can do better. So one question I had for you is, what are some ways that we as a horse industry shoot ourselves in the foot and fail to help protect our lifestyle and actually just kind of make things harder for ourselves?
Well, the main thing is Western justice for what we do. If everybody out there knew what we did and how much we're fighting, they would all be minimum $25 a year member. I mean, that's the key. If you want to do your life and you want to go not worry about all this stuff, let us worry about it, because I have the team. We've got the experience. I'm running up on 20 years of doing this crap now. The way I look at it, and I still look at it, and I'm very positive about it, is that if you put ranching, the Western horse world, and the rodeo world all together, there's no bigger, more financially well-heeled group of people in the United States. We are the largest recreational entity in the United States by far. And we could be the strongest lobby. We could keep these people out of our hair, but we need everybody behind us.
So what do you think is keeping that from happening? Why do we seem like we're in these little subcultures within?
Apathy, and there's a lot of smart people that run all of these, that are involved in all of these organizations. Because you think about it, with that group of people who are one of the most financially well-heeled group of people in the United States, there's a lot of very smart people that are involved in the horse industry as owners and, trainers and all kinds. There's a lot of smart people. Smart people can be the biggest detriment to their own safety a lot of times, because they believe that they understand and that they're able to get things done or protect themselves. And I'll give you a really good example. So I deal a lot with water rights issues for ranchers. Every irrigation district out here in the West, everybody has, you have water rights that come. You don't just punch a well for the most part. You have to have water rights that come from somewhere. And all these irrigation districts we have, these are in some very large farming areas. These irrigation districts, smart people again, running them. Center for Biological Diversity comes in and they say, we're going to sue you out of your water if you don't do a habitat conservation plan for all these endangered species. The Center for Biological Diversity is they're probably my biggest enemy and my biggest foe on all of the ranching issues. So, but they'll come in and these farmers, or these guys that run these irrigation districts, think they're really smart, and they're gonna be the first ones to outwit the 39 lawyers that are sitting over there at Center for Biological Diversity to have done this same thing over and over for the last 20 years. And they have a really good game plan, and they know what to watch for, and they get hornswoggled every time. These irrigation districts, these guys that think they're smart, and I go in there and I tell them exactly what I'm telling you right now. This has happened over and over and over, and they still think, well, we're going to be the first ones to outsmart these guys. No, you're not. Let me tell you how you're going to get rid of them. You're going to stand up and you're going to fight. You're going to fight them. You're not going to negotiate with them and win. They're going to win that negotiation because they understand what words mean. And they put little caveats in all of the documents to where they can build on that and bastardize it and do that and get you out of your water. And they've done it over and over and over. And I've watched it happen. So apathy kills.
Yes.
Killing our industry because people will not stand up and fight. They won't get behind what we do, to the degree where we can actually make a difference. I want to build a legal fund for ranchers, because where most of the ranchers in the West, because we have so much public lands out here, and most of the ranchers in the West have gone out of business. I know of upwards of 100 ranches that have gone out of business in just Nevada alone.
Wow.
And it's because the federal government comes in and puts pressure on them or cuts their AUMs back and does all these things, and they don't fight it. And then they end up going out of business, or they end up with a major problem that they can't recover from, or to fight it, they don't have the money to do it. And where we end up losing all these people is so there's two legal foundations out here that do a really good job of helping ranchers and helping farmers once their cases hit the Supreme Court, or just even some at the circuit court level. But it's below the circuit court. So you got, for people who don't understand, circuit court, like the Ninth Circuit, 10th Circuit in Colorado, Ninth Circuit in California, those take up all of the Western United States as far as the circuits for the most part. And until it gets to that level, the Pacific Legal Foundation, which is a great organization, the Mountain States Legal Foundation, another great organization, they'll take that up, and they have money, donor money that comes in that they can take your case and not charge you for.
Wow.
But it's the lower level, the bottom end, that always gets these ranchers, the majority of them. And they can't afford, or they mortgage the ranch, or they do whatever. They can't afford to fight at that level, so they go away prior to it making to the circuit court and the Supreme Court level.
Well, and that's the thing, is a lot of people aren't realistic about what can happen. They kind of have this naive view of the way the court system works, like, oh, justice will prevail. It frequently does not, because it is whatever you can get. Basically, money is what wins, usually.
Right.
Whoever has the most funds for the longest time is the one that wins more often than not. And then also, just totally depends on the judge, completely. So it's once stuff gets into the courts, often it can go either way. It is not, we don't have any right to be arrogant or overconfident that our side is going to prevail, and frequently too, because not even our side can articulate why we need to be concerned with some of these things.
What's really funny is that I've gotten to the point now where there's a lot of people that think I'm a lawyer, because I know so many facts and laws and things like that over the years. But I just tell them I'm a high school educated Marine. I just like to fight. But the one of the things that's the key to winning a lot of these battles, because I did a lot for dairy farms and pork farms. We did a lot of stuff like that, especially to protect the harvest. And there's a clause in almost every state. I think there's only 2 states that don't have it. There's a clause that's basically a right to farm that basically says that if you come in and you move in next to a dairy, or you say you move in next to a pork producer's outfit, if you've been there for a year or more in business, and somebody moves in there and somebody starts complaining about what you're doing, and you didn't significantly change what you're doing. So if you didn't go from a pork farm to a steel mill, or a steel mill to a pork farm, or something like that. You didn't change your business. You just expanded your business, made it bigger. There's nothing they can do about it. And there's not one thing they can do about it. And that is in your right to farm bill in almost every state. And people don't even know. A lot of attorneys don't even know it's there. To be able to, I have told attorneys how to fight an issue. I've called them because somebody calls me and says, "Hey, my attorney's having hell with this, and we're going to lose this. And I know you've been a part of winning some of these deals. So what can we do?" And I tell them about that, and they go, "Oh." So that ends up being a game changer for them, and they can go win their suit or their case. And those are things that we know how to do that, I mean, I've got, like I said, I've got the greatest agricultural attorney I think that's ever been.
It's great.
And he's actually was the one that was tasked with starting the EPA at one time and has seen what the EPA has done and bastardized, and totally morphed into something that it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
So he's I mean, when he goes and talks to the Supreme Court or anybody else about some of these issues, they go, "Oh, yeah, I know." So, they really look at him and go, "Wow." So, there's a lot of great things that we do. Like we saved one ranch in Paisley, Oregon, Central Oregon, from a $35 million DOJ lawsuit. They had $35 million coming up against them, and we saved them from that with the team we put together and the experts we put together. That was a very fun one for me because we were able to go in there and really change.
Mm. Oh, that's great. Well, just to be respectful of your time, let's wrap up. But I want to ask you, what are some ways people can get involved and help if they are not of the apathetic variety?
Well, the best thing to do is become a member and stay on top. Just look at what we send. Don't just delete our emails because we don't send 100 emails a month. We send, maybe one a week at the most. And people need to see what's going on, but we need the support. We need the members that's why we have a $25 membership. I mean, that's less than a McDonald's breakfast, for a couple people, but we need those people. We need those numbers so that when I go to DC, they look at me and go, "Oh crap, here comes Dave with Western Justice. We need to listen."
Is that part of what helps send you to?
A lot of times, yeah, for sure. I mean, if I relied on memberships to do everything we do, we'd be in trouble. I've got significant donors that help out in different
Good.
ways, but also if you become a member, it's almost like even at a $25 range, you have stake in the game,
Mhm.
and you're at least showing that you're a part of it, and that's a big deal. If I had, the 500,000 members that we should have, that'd be enough money for us to do. We could change the world with that. We could change this whole scenario. We have things we're going after with these environmental groups that are going to prove that they're funded by foreign countries to stop our production of our natural resources. I have the people, some of the greatest investigators in the world. I mean, they probably are really. They're former military. They were tasked by the Pentagon to figure out where the terrorist groups were getting all their money. I mean, these guys are the best. And they're the ones that found everything out about the Great Pocatello land grab, the documentary we won an Emmy for. So
That's great.
yeah.
Where can you find info on that, by the way?
Well, the only thing that's out right now is the trailer because there's been so many moving parts in that, and there's going to be, if the FBI ever gets their shit together, then there should be about 20 indictments coming fairly soon. So we're trying to, as this thing has evolved, we're trying to make sure when we send it out there, it's the most updated version because what we went into there was not what we found. We found something totally different and probably one of the most corrupt scenarios that these guys have ever seen. They've seen it in third world countries. They've never seen it in the United States.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay. Well then, where's the best place to go for more info on all of this? The website?
Yeah, our C4 website has most everything on it. The C3 does too. So we have two entities. We have a C3, which we don't do political work with. What we do, we can do all of our legal work and all of our any kind of documentary stuff, that kind of stuff we do through our C3. And then C4 is a legislative fund. So that's the one we do all our political work through. So that's westernjustice.info. And then the C3 is wjustice.org.
Okay. And I'll put those in the description of this episode. So, all right. Well, I sure appreciate your time.
You bet.